Welcome back to another episode of the LATAM MedTech Leaders Podcast. Today, we have Andrés Herrero, CEO and founder of i2medi, i2medi, right, in Germany. Andrés, it's great to have you here with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you. It's a pleasure, and we feel very honored and proud to be part of this session and the collaboration with you.
Excellent. All right, Andrés, let's get started by asking you about your journey. How is it that you got to where you are today?
Well, basically, I started in medical device industry 25 years ago.
Wow.
As you can see from the cut of my hair, it has some years that passed by. And I started to work in cardiology and afterwards in neurology for big multinational companies, amongst them Biotronik or Abbot. And then finally, 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, I decided to found my own company, i2medi, where we had the target to bring products to the Latin American market. I have a Ph.D. in biochemistry and a master degree in economics, and I have been working in all the aspects of commercialization of medical devices in all this time. And then I said, okay, when I do this for companies, maybe I can do this also for customers. And that's why I teamed up with some very experienced people in the different countries, and we founded the company that has then evolved. And I'm half German, half Cuban. That is the reason why I'm so, let's say, intrigued by the Latin American culture. And now I leave it up to you and the team to decide if I got the best of both cultures or the worst.
I'm sure you have the best of both cultures. I mean, it's rare to find somebody who can navigate the two cultures. And of course, you speak Spanish, you speak German, you speak English, and who knows what else. And that combination is really priceless when you want to do business internationally, especially in Latin America. So tell us more about i2medi. I mean, what's really the value proposition? What's the problem that i2medi tries to solve for the industry, and why your solution is the best solution around?
Yeah, perfect. First of all, we are a multinational distribution and market access company. And what we are trying to do, or what we are doing, is bringing companies with real innovations to the Latin American market. We have own offices in Brazil, in Mexico, and in Colombia. And we're also partnering with some distributors in other key markets like Chile, for example, or Peru, or Costa Rica. Now, we are focused on helping the customers really to enter the market with a real and sustainable value proposition for their product and the right positioning. The big problem that we face nowadays, and I think in almost all countries, is that we have a very agile development industry with new innovations, which is meeting a very rigid reimbursement system and healthcare system that does not want to have any innovation and changes. And this is what we try to do to bridge these, let's say, completely opposed positions and try to bring them in a successful syntony.
That's fantastic. So the way you go about that is by doing lobbying to the different reimbursement stakeholders in each country. How do you bring innovation to these markets that are hungry for innovation, but as you said, the system is so rigid that is almost impossible to get a code to get reimbursed? because most of these countries, as we all know here, the public system covers the majority of the population. So it's really, really key to have a code to be able to sell the products, and the hospital can get paid for them. So how do you solve that?
Okay, first of all, we need to distinguish between the kind of solutions that you want to bring into the market. If you have a solution that or whose benefit is to increment the efficiency and it's an investment of the health care provider, then of course you're not finding the necessity for the reimbursement, but still you need to convince the customer. The other thing is if you have a product like an implantable device where you need insurance coverage in order to get reimbursement, then in this case, definitely the topic of the reimbursement is very essential. Now, in principle, Latin America is even more friendly to the introduction of some innovations than, for example, Europe. The
Interesting. Really?
regulatory burden, the regulatory burden to get a code here in Germany is, for example, I would say it's a 3.5 years process, very, very, very complex and very costful, with very low probabilities of success unless you have a very sound health technology assessment with a very, very predominant and dominant outcome. Now,
Wow.
in Latin America, you have the private and the public market, and the private market is a little bit more flexible, and it allows sometimes the innovations to be introduced to certain, let's say, to certain extent into the system quicker than in Europe.
Okay.
So even though the healthcare system as a global, from a public perspective, is maybe not that sophisticated than in many countries in Europe, and I'm not meaning this disrespectful, I'm simply talking about the economic power of the insurance companies. Sometimes for the private insurances, I have experienced a more flexible way in, let's say, in accepting certain innovations and certain codes to be used for certain innovations. Now, your question was, how do we proceed? It's not a thing that comes overnight, and that has to be very clear to all of our customers, and we tell this our customers. You're not getting this into the market and the next year you're going to have a code and invoice a big amount of money, but it has to go step by step with some specific smaller, let's say, successes in the country with a reference site. You need to build a local reference site first. You need
Yes.
to talk to the societies, to some key opinion leaders in the societies, in order to, as first step after they have experienced the product, that they accept and would introduce the product into the guidelines. That is
Yes.
the first step that needs to be taken. Sometimes this requires a clinical study, also locally. We can talk about this later in more detail. Sometimes not. And then once the guideline has been published, this is the basis for making a submission to the private insurances typically first, and the governmental insurances typically later, for approval of the new solution into a healthcare code. Of course, we're always trying to find an existing code that we may use, which is our
Yes.
first approach, to do a very detailed analysis to see, oh, there exists something. Let's say I have a 3D mapping system for any electromechanical analysis, and there exists a code that is similar that we can use. Then we use that one in order to avoid the whole process. But in many cases, or in some cases, this is not possible. Then we need to go that step and that route.
That's fantastic. So I imagine that you are one of the few companies doing this in Latin America, because I haven't seen anything like this before. if I recollect correctly. I've been doing this work in Latin America, helping companies do clinical trials, medical device companies clinical trials, and I've had some experience with market access projects. I've gotten regulatory registrations in Mexico, in Brazil, in Colombia, in several countries. So sometimes I have to do research. I have to get involved in some market access type of related activities, and I haven't been able to find anybody like i2medi, to be honest with you. So I think the the solution to that reimbursement problem or to the market access problem is something that is badly needed in the industry, especially foreign companies, U.S. companies, European companies that are looking to diversify their revenue, and also they're looking for easier ways to start selling before they get into the larger markets. In other words, if a U.S. company is interested in getting European approval, as you said, getting a code in Germany, etc., and the different countries were in the European Union, sometimes it's a lot easier to do that in Latin America, in countries like Mexico, Brazil, Colombia. Is that a first statement?
Yeah, I think that is correct. First, I believe one of the reasons why there are not so many companies doing what we do is that the multinational companies from, let's say, or I would say, the companies that would like to internationalize their business, they first look to, if they come from the US, they look to Europe and
Europe.
maybe to Asia,
Yes.
and from Europe they look to the US first,
Yes.
and um, Latin America sometimes is managed in an opportunistical way. Let's pick a
Yes.
distributor and hope that he will sell the product over
Yes.
there.
Yes.
I don't want to use a lot of time and efforts to do that.
Exactly.
The
And hold on,
people
hold on. I'm
under,
sorry. I'm sorry.
yeah,
In that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you are bringing up a great point, Andres. Usually, that opportunity happens at a conference or something, and they find a distributor, and they have a couple of
yeah,
drinks, and the distributor promises that with no effort they can get into the Mexican market, and the distributor will pay for everything, the registration. But they don't tell the company that the distributor will control the registration for 10 years or 5, 10 years, whatever the expiration time period is. So yes, you're absolutely right. It's too bad. I think there's going to be a lot more education in the industry to tell U.S. companies, European companies that Latin America has, I mean, the size of the market is double the size of the United States, over 600 million people. The issue is that it's very fragmented, but that also creates opportunities because that brings barriers of entry for the competition. So if you are a medical device company from Europe or the US, I think you have to look carefully at Latin America as a way to start generating revenue before you get into those larger markets, like you said, Asia or Europe, that take usually longer. And they're closer to home in case of American companies, right?
absolutely, absolutely. I could not, let's say, concur more with what you said. I mean, Brazil is the seventh biggest healthcare market in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not, let's say, if you talk, you have, of course, you have the United States, you have Japan, you have Germany, and then you have Italy, and already France, and then already you start getting with China, and then you have already starting to get into Brazil as one of the
Yes.
key markets, and
Yes.
Mexico is also a significant market. Now, therefore, I think there is an underestimation, and sometimes, and of course, the customers, I have to admit, in Latin America, in particular in Brazil, are very innovation driven. They are very tech friendly. They like new technologies and new approaches. So you find this on the ground. I have to admit this for the people in Germany, which I also know very well, as you know. They sometimes see the glass half empty. So it's always the innovation. What is the risk? What is the problem? While when you go to to Brazil, you always find the people with the glass half full. Wow, this is great. What are the opportunities that we can leverage with this? So I think that is an important point. Now, coming back, the companies many times want to, let's say, exploit Latin America with not a lot of effort. So, distributor, you do your
Yes.
stuff and then
Yeah.
continue. And
Exactly.
if I have a product, for example, if I'm coming with the 15th cranial plate that I'm going to sell and I have a good price, then okay, you may have luck with a distributor to do this. But if you're coming with an artificial intelligence algorithm for improving the diagnostic, for example, for coronary artery disease, you immediately have a complex discussion with the clinicians and the healthcare body about sensitivity, specificity,
Yes.
positive predictive value, negative predictive value.
Yes.
You are the clinical trials experts who know that, and you and then of course there comes the question about the reimbursement. This is something that has not existed. So how do you fit this into a screening program that exists and that has established values? Therefore you need to put or use much more experience and thoughts and analytics to do that. And of course, and this is the last thing to add, I have to admit that, of course, we work in an interesting way that's called the hybrid distribution model. So we have a lot of our what we get is based on success, but not everything, because we cannot bear the risk for all this introduction
Sure.
completely
Yes.
alone. Yeah.
Yes. But there's a component of success, of course. So your interest is aligned with the interest of the client.
Yeah, it's the biggest part. So for us,
Yes.
it's basically more or less we work on a very low cost basis for doing all the effort and the work. But if we reach certain milestones, then we continue. We have a long-term agreement. Most of
Excellent.
the clients we're working with, we work with them for more than 4 or 5 years,
Wow.
yeah, at least. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. That's great, Andres. All right. So let's talk about going back to the issue of the distributors, because you also touched on a very interesting point. And it is my perception, maybe wrong, please correct me, but I think distributors are looking for easy products to sell, something that can generate revenue for them tomorrow. If you present a distributor with a product that is highly innovative, as you said, artificial intelligence method to diagnose early on coronary disease, heart failure, things like that, and there's no code, and they recognize that it's a very innovative product. I mean, it's an awesome product, but it's going to face so much resistance from the scientific societies, from the healthcare system in general, to introduce the product. I mean, not to mention the reimbursement. If there is no reimbursement, how will the distributor sell the product? So I don't think the distributor is in the business of solving all those matters, doing all these lobbying with the scientific societies, and getting involved with clinical trials and all that, because the payoff will probably happen in 5 years. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that is a spot-on question and a very important aspect. The distributors typically are, or I always say, sales are like the water. It goes where it disappears as easiest.
Yes, yes,
So if
yes.
I have a possibility to do a lot of sales with a very simple way by responding to a tender, filing a
Yes,
document,
yeah,
send it over, just offer an easier
yeah,
price, I'm not
yes,
making a lot of margin, but I take it with me. Now,
yeah,
um, what we do is much more effortful, and therefore we look for real partnership in a certain way. As me and the team that we're working together, we all have been working for multinational companies many years, and we all have the, let's say, a corporate approach, not a
yes,
distributor approach to the market.
exactly.
And therefore we, let's say, if I tell my customers, we are um, kind of an externalized branch of their company in the country. And just to give you a highlight for Impulse Dynamics, which is a manufacturer of a completely innovative heart failure implant, we are the only market outside the direct markets that has achieved guideline acceptance.
Wow.
Only in markets where they have been working with a direct distribution company, so their own daughters, they have achieved guideline acceptance. And we did this in Brazil, where you can open up the file for implantable devices and you find a specific section on cardiac contractility modulation that we were able to lobby in there. And we were at the moment submitting the file to the private insurance authorities. We have written a complete health technology assessment according to the Brazilian guidelines. And if that comes through, that is a big game changer.
Yes, yes. I will represent a big revenue increase for the client, for your client, for the company.
But as you said, it took us more than 5 years to reach that point. I have to admit there were 2 years of Corona that let's say have slowed down everything because nothing was working.
Yeah.
But let's say in the meantime, only that we are implanting in private centers with private customers in the best institutions in the country. But to really go big by the numbers, you need to have a code and an acceptance. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so the profile of your clients, I imagine, are visionary companies. Or, I mean, most companies, as we just discussed, Andres, just want the easy thing to do or the customary thing to do. Just if you're from Europe, you go to the United States. If you're from the United States, you go to Europe and maybe Asia, Japan and China if you're aggressive enough. And that's it. And the rest of the world is opportunistic. If a distributor comes along, knocks on my door, I just give them the power of attorney to register my product. And if they sell something, great. If not, who cares? I'm already working in Europe or the United States. Anyway, my point is that I guess the profile of your clients are companies that are more visionary than the traditional manufacturer. I mean, companies that really recognize Brazil as the 7th largest market in the world, Argentina, Mexico, Colombia as big potential revenue generating markets, right? I mean, what makes your clients different from the other companies? That's probably what I'm trying to ask you.
Okay, I think our clients that we are having, they understood that they have a cunning innovation, but the innovation is not enough.
Isn't enough.
Many companies believe the product is enough, and this is not true. It is, let's say, for us, if the product is not good, of course, it's much harder to sell it than if you have a good product. But if you have a good product and you have no, let's say, not the right positioning, not the right market approach, not the right price, not the right segment that you're positioning it to, then the product will also fail. And I think our customers have understood that they have a fantastic innovation because we are looking for real innovations. If somebody makes, let's say, a pacemaker this piece smaller, this is not a real innovation for us, or it has a 1 year more longevity.
It's just an incremental thing. Yeah.
It's an incremental. But when you come with a complete different thing, where you have to say to the doctor, listen, for this heart failure patient, there's nothing new, or we have sold and we're selling densitometers.
Yes,
work
I
on
saw that.
Ultrasound basis.
Yes, you told me that.
Yeah. And that is this is a real innovation that the patient gets not radiated anymore.
Yes.
And
fantastic.
But you have to face the let's say the concerns of the radiologist. Is it working? Is it good? Is it as good as the existing? But again, to your question, our customers have understood that there needs to be done the lobby work, and that it's not coming for free. And that if you want to have sustainable growth, then in a particular positioning, then you need to partner with people, multiply the resources and the power. And they also understood one thing, that the opportunity, the window of opportunity nowadays is shorter than ever. There are so many innovations that you can be sidelined in 1 year by a complete new technology.
You are absolutely right. Great point.
That means that you need to be more senseful and look into the relevant markets. That's what we also do. We are trying to focus. We have selected these countries also where we have direct organizations due to the fact with the access to regulatory, let's say, to the positioning. In Brazil, it takes long. In Mexico, it's intermediate, and in Colombia, it's fast.
Yes.
And then we can
Exactly.
help to start
You
to
can
generate
strategize.
something.
Yes, yes, yes. Very good.
Yeah.
So Andres, going back to my comment earlier about similar companies or competitors of yours or i2medi, have you seen anybody doing anything like this at the level or with the sophistication that you guys do it? I mean, is this a blue ocean or is it a red ocean? What do you think?
No,
What
this
makes
is
you different
definitely.
from what is out there?
I think it makes us different because of the completeness of the solution that we are offering, and that we are starting when others stop. So you
Okay.
have a lot of companies doing regulatory approval processes. Yeah? So
Yes,
if you want
yes.
to
That's
go the
a
regulatory,
commodity. Yes.
you go to Emergo and you go to Vera Rosas in Brazil or whatever, and we are not competing with them. If you have the registry already, fantastic for us. We don't need
Yes,
to do
that's
it.
great.
We're not
Exactly.
focused
Yes.
on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But once it is there, you need to manage the market introduction. And then you have, on one hand, the distributors that we talked about, and we have, on the other hand, let's say our model, which is a kind of hybrid distribution model. And it can be even we have a customer for whom we invoice. They have a power of
yeah.
attorney
Wow. Really?
with a lawyer. We invoice for them, but it's their bank account. So it's a
Wow.
kind of virtual company for, let's say, for the customer.
Great.
We only use our vehicle to invoice, but the money goes to the company without
Yes.
having to fund the company. And
Yes.
so we have a lot of models in this direction that help the customers.
That's fantastic, Andres. All right, Andres, we're close to the end of the show, but I wanted to ask you about clinical trials because that's really what I do every day, and it really intrigues me. How is it that you guys use clinical research as a part of the whole solution for market access? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. Julio, I think we are basically the clinical trials. We are also not, we have never found a customer, or we're never looking for a customer to say we're going to do a trial in LATAM. This is not our thing.
Yes.
But when, for example, let's take the example of the densitometer. We went
Yes.
into Latin America, and we had in the backbone a European study of 1,300 patients head to head with the actual gold standard, showing more than 90% specificity. You know what the Latin American customers told us? It's a different ethnicity. These are not, that's not here. It's not in Latin America. You don't have Latin American data. So you have to prove it. And then we said, yeah,
Yeah.
come on, the study has been done. They said, no, no, no.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there was no other way to prove it with the customers. And then we set up
Yeah.
a study, and we conducted two major trials. For example, one was in Brazil with the Unifesp University, and at that point, actual president of the Osteoporosis Society of Brazil.
He was a key opinion leader, investigator leading this study.
Yeah, she was a key opinion leader, and then she did a head-to-head comparison in her clinic in 343 patients. So that is, every patient got the two exams in a
Wow.
double, let's say, in a blinded way.
Yes.
We had to deliver the data to a committee from our technology, and they delivered the data to the committee from the DEXA system, which is the gold standard. And then they compared and they figured out that there was a bigger than 90% specificity and
Wow.
sensitivity. And then the customer said, okay, this is working. And another one we did in Mexico, that they say, wow, this is not relevant market for us, and etc. That was a little bit later, so we could already reference on the different ethnicity, and then they conducted in the Clínica Cuatro, which is the biggest gynecological clinic in Mexico, a study in 400 and I think 445 patients, women, on the prevalence and of osteoporosis in a younger patient group. And imagine that 11% of the women have osteoporosis. Going on a let's say routine checkup, everybody was coming in, intention to treat. 11% found with osteoporosis, which was a significant finding. And after that finding, we have sold to two regions in Mexico with the secretary of de la salud of a specific region some devices on the trucks to travel around the country, measure the women to prevent osteoporosis and fractures. And this is a gorgeous project. This is
Yes, I'm sure.
a very good project. So this is what we do in studies. We are doing at the moment a study in Chagas disease, as you know, a very Latin American problem.
Yes.
And we have also conducted an artificial intelligence study, again, to show and prove that it's working in a specific context. This was in the chest pain clinic, where we then showed the sensitivity and specificity of the algorithm compared to the actual standard of care. So, as I said, we are using that studies if it's necessary to be part of either filing a dossier, convincing the customers in the market introduction, not as a standalone solution. And in this context, I have to say, I'm very much looking forward in the future to also work with you and BioAccess.
Thank you.
As you are the experts, and hopefully we, let's say, can join forces on one or the other stunning project in LATAM. And that brings me to a question to you. You are the expert. What about the regulatory environment, the outlook for hurdles for starting studies in LATAM? Europe is terrible. It's very complicated. It's very expensive. Takes ages. How is the current situation in LATAM, and what is your prediction as well in that context for the future?
Yes, Andres. LATAM is going through a period in its history where the different countries, in its history and its evolution, the region is evolving very rapidly. In evolving, I mean the way the different countries are now looking at the world, the way all these different countries are looking at their economic models, and they are transitioning from being some agriculture societies in Latin America are transitioning to industrial societies. Some industrial societies in Latin America are transitioning to knowledge societies. So you see this shift in the way the new laws are being enacted in the different countries. You see this shift in the interest of many Latin American countries in joining the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is the club of wealthy countries around the world with the best practices in all matters related to society, economics, politics, importation, exportation, intellectual property, etc. So my point with all these is that many countries in Latin America are looking at science, technology, and innovation as the engine of their future. So exporting bananas, exporting avocados, coffee is not really going to make it. It's not really going to be a sustainable, or oil too, a sustainable way of leading the country towards the next 20, 30, 50 years. So because you're depending on pricing competition, other countries. If the country next door starts producing bananas cheaper than you, you're gonna get cut out of the banana business very easy. So the best way for these countries to compete in a global scene is by becoming knowledge societies. And the way you become a knowledge society is by embracing science, technology, and innovation in your country. So with that said, I am seeing the shift of many countries towards that direction. So they are looking at clinical research as a way for them to bring talent from overseas, to get this transfer of knowledge, advanced knowledge that comes from the United States, that comes from Europe, that comes from certain parts of Asia, to do studies with the local investigators. And eventually that will produce a more innovative society in the local countries. It's like, I usually joke, I tell people, it's like if you want to have a great soccer team in Colombia, for example, just bring Messi, Ronaldo, and a few other players, great players, to play in my team for a year. So eventually, Colombia is going to start producing its own Messi and Ronaldo players. So that's the same thing with science, technology, and innovation. You have to bring trials to the country to start learning how to innovate. How do you test these hypotheses? So this is a great way for countries to become knowledge societies eventually down the road, and also to bring foreign direct investment that positively impact the local economies. So I've seen a positive shift in the regulations. I've seen countries like El Salvador, countries like Panama, Paraguay, countries that you wouldn't expect, issuing these laws to make the regulatory environment more attractive, friendlier for foreign companies, pharmaceutical, medical device companies to come and do clinical trials. Even Mexico is trying its best. It's been difficult because all the baggage that COFEPRIS has, but even Mexico is doing whatever it can with whatever they have now to make the country more attractive for clinical trials. Brazil, just a year or so ago, issued a new law, two different laws, one for medical devices, one general law for clinical trials, that will probably make Brazil a powerhouse for clinical research. Argentina issued a new law in 2017, something like that. So my point is that there's a positive shift towards making countries in Latin America more attractive for clinical trials. So I'm very optimistic about the future of Latin America. And before I conclude, there are two events that happen that kind of confirm what I'm saying. Velocity Research, the largest site network in the world, just started an operation in Latin America. They opened an office in Brazil. They are going to start acquiring clinical research sites in Brazil, in Mexico, and in Argentina as a start before they start in other countries. And there's also another private equity company that I forget their name, a couple of weeks ago. They just bought their second site in Brazil. So there's a positive win in Latin America for clinical research.
Fantastic news. That's let's say helping you and helping us and helping the customers,
exactly,
the companies and the patients. So
yes, and the patients.
Basically,
they have
helping everybody.
Yes, helping everybody. Patients have access to these innovative technologies faster than before. Yeah. So Andres, we're close to the end of the show. Any last comments? Any words of wisdom? What would you say to the CEO of a smaller medical device company with an innovative product that is just learning about your services or just learning about Latin America? What would be your words of wisdom to him or her?
I think I would tell him, look at the evidence that has been generated. When you buy a stock fund, you look into the past to see the future and to predict the outcome. And I'm happy to share with everybody of them what we have done, our track record, in order to convince them that this is the right way. We all have a mission to bring innovation and better therapy and better quality to patients. and to doctors, to the societies in Latin America. This is our mission and our vision, and everybody for whom and with whom we can share that vision is welcome, that we do and to try harder to achieve that. Yeah.
Excellent. Beautiful. All right, Andres, thank you so much for being in the show today.
Thank you.
I look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely, we will, Julio, and hopefully soon in 3D.
Absolutely. Ciao.
Ciao.